They say that if you say her name 3 times, she will appear in the mirror. But what happens when she doesn't leave? This is the story of Bloody Mary, and it's not just a legend. Today, we're sharing the 3 scariest Bloody Mary stories. Stay tuned for these chilling tales. I was in 7th grade at the time. One afternoon during recess, a group of girls decided they wanted to play a frightening game inside the bathroom. I still remember that day vividly. I didn't want to participate, but when my close friend dragged me along, I couldn't say no. She said, "They're going to play a spooky game." Reluctantly, I went with her and saw that another friend, Harriet, had also been pulled into it. The girls led us into the bathroom, which had a large mirror and old indistinct tiles on the walls. The light inside was broken, so the room was dark and eerie. Once inside, the girls began explaining the game. They said they were going to attempt to summon Bloody Mary, an old tale where a blood-stained girl appears in the mirror, her eyes glowing with rage. I noticed Harriet seemed somewhat annoyed and uneasy. She said, "This is all nonsense. It's just a story to scare kids." But there was an unusual excitement among the girls. They knew that nothing might happen, but it was as if someone was whispering in their ear, "Maybe it's true. Maybe it will happen this time." Anyway, the girls first closed the bathroom door to block out any light from outside. Then they turned on the tap and hot water began to flow. Gradually, steam filled the room. Everyone stood in front of the mirror, holding hands, and positioned themselves around it. I could feel the fear in the air, but no one wanted to admit it. Then the ritual to summon Bloody Mary began. We all chanted together 3 times, "Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary." A chill spread through the air and I felt a shiver down my spine. The mirror was soon covered in steam, and at first nothing was visible. But within seconds, a vague shape started to appear in the mirror. It seemed as though someone was standing inside the mirror. Suddenly, Harriet screamed, "See? It's all fake. What a waste of time." She abruptly went to the mirror and touched it, as if trying to prove that what was visible in the mirror wasn't real. Just then, a chilling gust of air swept through the room and everyone fell silent. The shape in the mirror became clearer, a female figure with blood-stained hair and eyes glowing red. Her lips curved into a grotesque smile. Terrified, we all wanted to leave the bathroom, but it felt as if our feet were frozen. Harriet quickly moved away from the mirror and ran towards the door, urging us to follow. We fled the bathroom in a panic, and that afternoon, the horrifying memory lingered in our minds. The next day, Harriet looked at me strangely and said, "Last night when I was coming home, I saw a black wallet lying in front of my door. Curious, I picked it up and opened it, and my hand started trembling immediately. Inside was an old black and white photo of a woman sitting on a throne-like chair. Her attire was from ancient times, and she was staring directly at me. A note in red ink read, 'These are the people I killed.' There was nothing else in the wallet." After going to bed, Harriet woke up the next morning to find deep scratches on her back and arms. She said, "Now I believe something happened to us." She was terrified all day, feeling as if someone was following her. The rest of us were stunned by Harriet's story. We examined the black wallet and photo she had brought. The woman in the picture seemed more lifelike than real. I still cannot forget that image. It is etched deeply in my mind. A week later, one night, I woke up suddenly. It was around 4 a.m., and my parents were working the night shift, so they wouldn't be home until around 6 a.m. I felt an odd and eerie presence around me. There was an unsettling sensation running through my veins. I was afraid to open my eyes because of what Harriet had experienced. Eventually, I opened my eyes, and what I saw was utterly horrifying. Floating beside my bed was the severed head of a beautiful woman. Her expression was one of a terrifying grin, and her eyes seemed to penetrate my soul. Her hair was styled elegantly, but now it was disheveled and strangely reversed. The horrifying image was burned into my brain. I quickly jumped out of bed and turned on the light, but when the light came on, there was nothing there. Everything around me appeared normal. I was anxious and confused, unable to discern whether it was a dream or reality, but that dreadful feeling and image were deeply ingrained in my mind. The next day, I met Harriet at school. After she described her experience, I realized that we had probably encountered some supernatural force. Harriet's experience and my own seemed to reveal a new truth. I didn't understand why these things were happening, but I was certain that some deep, invisible force was affecting our lives. When my friend Thomas and I were 18 years old, there was a special event happening at the old pub in our town. Thomas's father and sister were performing on stage, and they were becoming quite well known in the town. But we were still stuck in the routines of school life, craving something different to satisfy our curiosity. Every corner of the pub seemed to carry a piece of history. The walls were made of old wood, worn and faded by years of age. The chandeliers hanging from the ceiling reminded us of another era. However, what intrigued us the most was the staircase at the back, cordoned off by a rope. The mystery of what lay beyond the stairs caught our attention, as if it were a mysterious world beckoning us to explore. A little while earlier, we had overheard an old story downstairs. It was about a girl named Bloody Mary, who once worked at this pub. The story went that Mary was a young woman who met with a tragic accident and was brutally killed. Some people said her spirit was still trapped inside the pub, waiting for revenge. They claimed her spirit resided within the large mirror hanging in the unused bar upstairs. I couldn't quite understand what was going through Thomas's mind, but when he said, "Come on, let's go upstairs and test the Bloody Mary story," I felt a strange chill run down my spine. I tried to reason with him that it was just a silly tale, but once Thomas set his mind on something, it was hard to stop him. We climbed the stairs. The room upstairs was pitch dark, with only the moonlight filtering through the window. The silence in the room was eerie, as if the sorrows and pains of centuries had been compressed into this space. We approached the old mirror, a large, heavy piece encased in a wooden frame. Standing before it, our reflections seemed like people from another world. Thomas looked at me and said, "Let's start. We'll say Bloody Mary 3 times together." Reluctantly, I agreed. Slowly, we began to chant together, "Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary." At first, nothing happened, but after the 4th time we said Bloody Mary, I began to feel something strange. Our reflections in the mirror seemed to change. My face didn't quite look like mine. My eyes seemed unsettling, as if they belonged to another world. Thomas, however, didn't stop. He said, "Let's say it one more time." Fear gripped me, but I felt as if I were in a trance, unable to refuse him. We started again. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. Our reflections became more and more distorted. We saw a woman's figure slowly emerging between us. Her long hair seemed to be reaching out from within the mirror. She wasn't alone. Strange, shadowy figures were moving around her. There was something in her face that sent a chill down my spine. Suddenly, we heard a growl. It was as if a ghostly spirit was roaring from within the mirror. Both Thomas and I screamed in terror. At that moment, the air around the mirror grew heavy, as if we were suffocating. Suddenly, we heard the fierce barking of a dog right next to the door. We turned to see a massive dog with eyes filled with an eerie fear. The dog glanced at us once and then ran off. We chased after it, our hearts pounding in our chest. As we descended the stairs, it felt as if the world around us had changed. The darkness that had engulfed us just moments ago had now vanished, with no trace of the dog. When we returned to the pub, it felt as if we had come back from another world. Back inside the pub, both of us were silent. Thomas didn't say another word. We both knew that something had happened, something so terrifying that it was difficult for us to comprehend. That night, as we walked home, I felt as if something was following me. Even after leaving the pub, the terrifying face we had seen in the mirror remained etched deep in my mind. Both Thomas and I were petrified, but neither of us said a word. A strange silence hung between us. As we started walking down the street after leaving the pub, a deep silence settled over the town. The streets were empty, and the only sound was that of our footsteps. Suddenly, we heard an odd noise behind us. It sounded as if someone was following us. I turned around but saw nothing. Thomas looked at me and asked, "Did you hear that?" I slowly nodded, and that's when I realized the air around us had grown cold. We both began to walk faster, but the strange feeling continued to intensify. It felt as if some unseen force was gradually closing in on us. After a few moments, I gathered the courage to look back again, and this time I clearly saw it, a shadow, slowly advancing toward us. My breath caught in my throat, but I didn't say anything to Thomas. He had seen the shadow too, and his face had turned pale. We started running, but the shadow seemed to be chasing us. We ran down a dark alley, straight toward our homes, but no matter how fast we ran, the shadow continued to close in on us. I felt as though it would catch us at any moment. When we finally reached our homes, the shadow suddenly stopped. We rushed inside and locked the door. Both Thomas and I were gasping for air, as if we had just escaped from a horrible nightmare. A few moments later, I looked out the window. The shadow was standing outside for just a moment, then slowly faded away. Thomas looked at me and whispered, "It won't let us go." I knew he was right. That shadow wouldn't let us go until we returned to that mirror and faced it again. I was 14 when my best friend Liam told me that he was leaving. Liam, weighed down by sorrow, said quietly, "So, my mom got a new job. It's in London." His voice was very soft, as if he were revealing a deep wound. "It's 1,200 miles away from here." I looked it up online. The news left me stunned. Trying to hide my sadness, I said, "London is supposed to be an amazing place. There's no snowfall there." Liam's smile was a stark contrast to his mood. I hoped he wouldn't see my distress. Then Liam proposed a plan to make his departure memorable. "We could make our last day legendary," he said with a conspiratorial grin. He hadn't told anyone else about his departure yet. Since he was leaving in mid-February, everyone would notice his absence. What if everyone thinks that Bloody Mary took me away? The plan was brilliant. After school, we would gather everyone around the bathroom and announce that we were going to summon Bloody Mary in the mirror. Liam would slip out the window, climb down to the second-floor balcony, and then descend the stairs to his house. I would then come out and announce that Bloody Mary had taken him to another realm and no one would ever see him again. Since we all have to leave someday, accepting that allows us to control how we go. On that Friday after school, more than 24 people gathered around the bathroom. The previous year, Bloody Mary had been summoned by Jimmy Fisher, who was in 5th grade at the time. Jimmy had gone home early that day, embarrassed after wetting his pants. To this day, he still eats lunch alone. Liam and I could barely contain our smiles as we entered the bathroom, ready to execute our plan. Inside the bathroom, I stood in front of the mirror. Liam stood next to me, a bit nervously. "Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, I killed your son," I said loudly. Liam echoed my words, though his voice was somewhat shaky. We stared at our reflections, waiting for something to happen. Our reflections blinked in unison. Nothing happened. We both breathed a sigh of relief. "I should go now," Liam said, preparing to make his escape. A lump of sadness rose in my throat. "Yeah," I said, my voice barely audible. Liam placed one foot on the sink and the other on the open window. He gave me a final bittersweet smile. "Well, see you," he said. He began shifting his weight to slip out the window. As he was halfway through, I felt a sudden, strange impulse. "Boo!" I shouted. Hearing my scream, Liam's eyes widened in terror, and he lost his balance. I didn't want him to fall. I rushed to the window and looked outside. Liam was impaled on a metal pole that had once been part of a chain-link fence. He had fallen about 15 feet. The pole ran from temple to temple with blood and brain matter coating the top. His legs twitched as though he were running in place, but the pole held him firmly, swaying with each movement. His eyes darted around, and his mouth opened and closed, but he was already dead. A deep anguish settled in my chest. I realized that everything was over. The legend of Bloody Mary had become a horrifying reality. I thought, I have to bear this nightmare alone. In the following days, I was consumed by darkness and grief. Liam's family blamed me for his tragic death, and I understood that there was no escape from their judgment. An invisible rage gnawed at me, consuming me entirely. I told everyone that Liam had jumped out the window in fright after seeing something in the mirror, but the truth was, Bloody Mary had left her mark, and I could never forget it.